Beneath the rolling hills of southern France and the crumbling towers of forgotten castles lies a story rarely told. It is the story of a people who called themselves the Pure, who lived in the shadows of the medieval world and who dared to challenge the might of the Catholic Church. They are remembered today as the Cathars, and at the heart of their mystery lies a symbol both forbidden and sacred, the hidden cross. The Cathars were not kings or conquerors. They built no grand cathedrals of stone, and they did not leave behind golden relics enshrined in treasure chests. Instead, their memory is carried in whispers, in ruins, and in the fearful chronicles written by their enemies. To walk into their story is to step into a world where belief was both sanctuary and defiance, where every prayer could be dangerous, and every symbol could mean the difference between life and death. What made them so feared? Their faith rejected the wealth and corruption of Rome. They preached purity, simplicity, and a vision of the soul imprisoned in the world of matter, yearning to return to light. They carried a cross unlike any other, not displayed in gilded churches, but hidden away, a secret that bound them together against the power of inquisitors and crusaders. The church declared them heretics, but to many of their neighbors, they were guides, healers, and voices of truth. In castles perched on cliffs, in villages tucked between mountains, in songs sung by troubadours under starlight, their message spread across Occitania. Their story is both tragic and inspiring, filled with fire and blood, but also with resilience, mystery, and an enduring sense of hope. The hidden cross of the Cathars still haunts history. Was it a relic smuggled from a burning fortress? A symbol carved in secret upon stone? Or was it something far greater, a spiritual truth the Church could never destroy? These questions linger, waiting in silence, inviting us to listen to the echoes left behind. If you enjoy uncovering forgotten histories and exploring mysteries like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel, give this film a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps these stories live on, and together we can continue to seek the hidden truths of the past. In the 12th century, southern France stretched before the traveler as a land of contrasts. Known as Occitania, it was a region of rolling hills, fertile valleys and high mountains where the Pyrenees met the sky. Rivers wound through vineyards and fields of wheat, feeding villages where life pulsed to the rhythm of harvest and song. Unlike the harsher climates of the north, this was a place softened by sun and warmed by the sea winds of the Mediterranean. Yet beneath the beauty of its landscapes, shadows waited, subtle at first, but destined to grow darker with time. Occitania was not bound by the rigid order that marked the kingdoms of the north. Its people spoke a language of poetry, the tongue of troubadours, known as Occitan or Languedoc. Nobles, peasants, and poets alike shared in this culture, which prized freedom of expression and celebrated the art of verse. It was a society where knights pledged loyalty not only through war but through song, and where lords held courts that thrived on dialogue, music, and stories of love. This openness created fertile soil for ideas to travel, and in that soil, new beliefs began to take root. The lords of Occitania were independent, often resisting the pull of both the French crown and the Church of Rome. Castles dotted the hills, not massive like those of northern France, but elegant fortresses built for both defense and hospitality. Within their walls, conversations flourished, merchants exchanged goods from distant lands, and wandering preachers spoke words that carried the scent of rebellion. This freedom was rare in a Europe where the Church sought uniformity and kings demanded obedience. Here, the currents of life flowed differently. Religious life in Occitania was varied and complex. Monks travelled through its valleys, priests served its towns, but alongside them came voices of dissent. Pilgrims brought rumours of Eastern teachings, merchants carried fragments of forgotten gospels, and whispers of ancient knowledge lingered in the air. For some, the grandeur of Rome felt distant and corrupted, its wealth and power far removed from the simple faith of Christ. In the courtyards of lords and the hearths of villagers, quiet doubts began to stir. The troubadours, wandering singers, became more than entertainers. They were messengers of emotion, carrying coded words that touched hearts in ways sermons could not. Their songs spoke of love, both sacred and earthly, but hidden within those verses lay deeper reflections on truth, purity, and longing for a world unchained from corruption. What was sung as a ballad could also serve as a riddle, offering listeners a chance to hear messages that slipped past the watchful eyes of authority. Life in Occitania seemed peaceful, yet beneath the calm surface lay tensions. The independence of the region made it difficult for the Catholic Church to enforce uniform doctrine. Bishops might have titles, but they held little sway over the nobility, who valued their freedom more than obedience to Rome. Priests were tolerated, but not revered. As years passed, the authority of the Church weakened, while alternative voices grew bolder, planting seeds of faith that would one day blossom into open defiance. Occitania's spirit was one of duality, sunlight and shadow, loyalty and defiance, song and silence. The region's beauty gave the impression of harmony, but its openness allowed contradictions to coexist. Here, merchants might pass a monk on a road, while a noblewoman listened to a troubadour sing verses that carried dangerous undertones. In the same village, one family might attend Mass, while their neighbours gathered quietly with travelling preachers who spoke of purity beyond the church. The very geography of Occitania nurtured its independence. Its mountains offered protection, its valleys provided abundance, and its ports connected it to a wider world. Ideas arrived not only from Rome, but from Spain, from the Mediterranean, even from distant lands touched by the Crusades. The people absorbed these influences, blending them into a culture that resisted control. Such freedom, however, made the region vulnerable. For while the people celebrated their liberties, Rome watched with growing unease. The Church feared that what began in Occitania could spread like wildfire across Christendom. A people unbound by obedience, listening to wandering preachers instead of priests, posed a threat to the entire order of medieval Europe. In Rome, whispers of heresy became louder, warnings more urgent. Yet in Occitania itself, daily life continued, markets bustled, children played, troubadours sang, and the shadow of what was to come remained unseen by most. Occitania before the storm was a world of promise, beauty, and freedom, but also one of hidden danger. It was a land caught between light and shadow, unaware that the soil it nurtured would soon give rise to a faith so powerful and so feared that it would call forth the wrath of popes and kings alike. Out of this land would emerge the Cathars, the pure ones, who would carry a cross hidden from the eyes of the world. They called themselves the pure, seekers of truth uncorrupted by the world. To their enemies, they were Cathars, a name that soon became synonymous with heresy, but among their followers they were seen as bearers of a light, tarnished by the Church's wealth and ambition. In the 12th century, their teachings began to spread across Occitania, gaining strength in villages, towns, and castles. What began as whispers soon became a chorus, carried not by force of arms, but by conviction of spirit. The Cathars believed in a universe divided, a cosmos where spirit and matter stood in eternal conflict. The world of flesh, they taught, was not created by a good God, but by a dark power, a ruler of corruption, who bound the soul in chains of desire and decay. The true God, the God of light, resided beyond the world of matter, calling souls to return to purity. For the Cathars, salvation was not found in rituals of the church, nor in its sacraments of stone and gold, but in freeing the spirit from the prison of the body. Such a vision was radical. Where the church proclaimed salvation through baptism, confession, and obedience to Rome, the Cathars rejected all these as illusions. They saw priests and bishops not as guardians of faith, but as men corrupted by power and wealth. In their eyes, the cathedrals of Europe were not houses of God, but monuments to pride built upon the suffering of the poor. To follow the Cathar path was to strip away these illusions and seek truth in simplicity, purity, and rejection of the world's corruption. At the heart of their community were the perfecti, men and women who lived lives of complete renunciation. They abandoned wealth, refused to eat meat, and devoted themselves entirely to prayer and service. These were the guides of the Cathar faith, respected not for titles or power, but for the lives they lived. They carried no weapons, accepted no luxuries, and sought no earthly reward. In their presence, believers saw an example of what it meant to walk the path of light. The ordinary faithful, known as credentes, supported the perfecti and followed their teachings, though they did not take on the same extreme vows. Together they formed communities bound by trust, secrecy, and devotion. When danger pressed near, they protected their guides, offering them food, shelter, and loyalty. In return, the perfecti offered the consolamentum, a sacred rite that replaced baptism, confession, and communion with a single act of spiritual cleansing. Through this, the faithful believed they were prepared for the journey beyond the material world. The Cathar rejection of violence set them apart in an age of constant war. They refused to kill, refused to swear oaths, and condemned the shedding of blood. In a world ruled by knights and crusaders, such beliefs seemed both noble and dangerous. Lords and peasants alike saw in them an alternative to the endless cycles of conflict that plagued Europe. Yet their refusal to serve in armies or bend to feudal demands threatened the very structure of medieval society. Their teachings resonated strongly with the people of Occitania, who saw corruption in the wealth of bishops and the political maneuvers of Rome. For many, the Cathar faith offered a return to simplicity, a spiritual path unclouded by greed. The language of purity appealed deeply in a world where famine, disease, and violence seemed constant reminders of human frailty. The Cathars promised not the glory of earthly power, but the liberation of the soul from the darkness of the flesh. The spread of their ideas was swift, carried by preachers who moved quietly from town to town. They did not build grand churches, but spoke in fields, in homes, and in the courtyards of castles. Their message was direct, their presence humble, and their conviction unshakable. Unlike priests who demanded tithes, the Cathar perfecti gave freely, embodying the very ideals they taught. To many, this was faith as it should be, faith that asked for nothing but devotion. As their influence grew, the church began to take notice. Bishops in Occitania reported with alarm that villagers were turning away from Mass, that nobles were harboring heretics, and that troubadours sang verses echoing Cathar beliefs. Rome recognized the danger. These were not isolated heretics, but a movement gaining momentum across an entire region. A rival faith was rising in the heart of Christendom, and it carried with it a hidden cross that defied the power of the Church. The Cathars, the pure ones, had built a faith of simplicity, devotion, and resistance to corruption. Their vision of a world divided between light and darkness was both ancient and new, a reminder of forgotten teachings and a challenge to the authority of Rome. From the villages of Occitania to the halls of its castles, their voice grew louder, their presence stronger. Soon their hidden symbol would emerge, a cross unlike any the Church had ever raised. The cross, the most sacred emblem of Christendom, stood at the heart of both the Church and the Cathars, but its meaning was not the same. For Rome, the cross was triumph, lifted high on cathedrals, carried into battle, adorned with gold and precious stones. For the Cathars it was something else, something quieter, something forbidden. Their cross was not paraded in processions nor displayed in gilded relics. It was hidden, carried in silence, its meaning known only to those who sought truth beyond the reach of Rome. Some spoke of a simple wooden cross carried discreetly by the perfecti, tucked into folds of robes never raised in public. Others whispered of a cross drawn not on stone but in the air with a gesture, invisible to all but those who understood its meaning. To the Cathars, the cross was not a symbol of earthly power, but of suffering, purity, and resistance to corruption. It reminded them that Christ had not come to glorify wealth or authority, but to show a path of light through the shadows of the world. The Cathar cross was often concealed in geometry, woven into patterns that appeared decorative to the unknowing eye. In manuscripts, one might find lines intersecting in ways that hinted at hidden meaning, a secret cross embedded within text or illustration. On stone, in the margins of carvings, subtle markings suggested a presence that escaped the inquisitor's gaze. These hidden signs were not decoration, but a quiet declaration of faith in defiance of Rome. For the Cathars, the cross did not celebrate the crucifixion in the way the Church proclaimed. They did not believe in the worship of the suffering body of Christ, nor in the adoration of the instrument of execution. Instead, the hidden cross pointed to the eternal struggle between spirit and matter, between light and darkness. It was a reminder that the soul, trapped in the prison of flesh, could rise beyond suffering into purity. In this way, the cross became not a weapon of power, but a key to liberation. Legend spoke of the cross being passed secretly from one perfectus to another, like a sacred inheritance, never shown in public, always guarded. Some claimed it was a relic from the time of the apostles. Others believed it was a creation of the Cathars themselves, a symbol born in secrecy. Whatever its origin, it became the heart of their hidden identity, a mark of distinction between their faith and the grand displays of Rome. The very act of hiding the cross was itself a rebellion. In a world where the Church declared salvation through visible sacraments and symbols, the Cathars concealed their most sacred sign, protecting it from the gaze of authority. The hidden cross was faith without spectacle, devotion without power, belief without the blessing of Rome. It was both fragile and indestructible, for it existed not in grand monuments, but in the quiet strength of memory and conviction. Stories began to circulate of the hidden cross appearing in dreams, visions, and secret gatherings. Believers spoke of moments when the cross revealed itself, not in gold or stone, but in light, in the meeting of shadows, in the silent gesture of a perfectus raising a hand in blessing. To those who followed the Cathar way, such moments carried more power than any cathedral relic, for they were proof that truth endured in silence. The Church, hearing of these stories, grew ever more suspicious. If the Cathars carried a hidden cross, what did it mean? Was it a symbol of defiance, a claim to authority, or a relic that threatened the very foundation of Catholic truth? The mystery of the cross made the Cathars even more dangerous in the eyes of Rome, for symbols inspired not only devotion, but rebellion. The hidden cross carried more than spiritual meaning. It was a bond of identity, a quiet sign that linked believers across villages, towns, and castles. To recognize it was to recognize kinship, to share in a secret that bound communities together, even under threat of death. In this way, the cross became more than symbol. It became shield and sanctuary, uniting a scattered people in defiance of power. The Cathar cross remained hidden because it had to, yet its secrecy gave it strength. Unlike the gilded crosses of Rome, which could be broken, stolen, or defiled, the hidden cross could never be taken, for it lived in memory, in faith, and in the hearts of those who carried it. It was a cross unseen yet more enduring than stone, more powerful than armies, and more dangerous to the Church than all the words of heresy combined. Through the winding streets of Occitan towns and across the courtyards of noble castles, the sound of music carried like a gentle wind. The troubadours, wandering poets of the south, strummed their lutes and sang in the lyrical tongue of Occitan, verses that celebrated love, honor, and longing. To the casual listener, their songs spoke of knights and ladies, of the sweetness of devotion, of passion both sacred and earthly. But to those attuned to hidden meanings, these melodies carried something more. Within their words flowed secret currents, coded messages that bore the mark of Cathar belief. In an age where the Church guarded doctrine with vigilance, the troubadours became unlikely messengers of dissent. Their verses could be heard openly, for who would suspect a song of harboring heresy? Yet beneath metaphors of unattainable lovers and distant journeys lay a deeper language, one that whispered of purity, of light, of a truth beyond the material world. A faithful listener might hear not only of a knight's devotion to his lady, but of the soul's longing for liberation from the prison of flesh. The tradition of courtly love, so admired in Occitania, lent itself easily to this secret dialogue. The lady could symbolize the divine light, unreachable and pure, while the knight's quest reflected the soul's struggle against darkness. A kiss could stand for the consolamentum, the sacred rite of the Cathars, while the distance and suffering in the song mirrored the soul's exile in the material world. The metaphors were layered, allowing each audience to hear what they were prepared to hear. Troubadours themselves were often more than entertainers. Some were sympathetic to Cathar teachings, others perhaps initiated into their mysteries. Their songs became a bridge, carrying dangerous ideas across regions without attracting suspicion. Where sermons might invite condemnation, music slipped through unseen, spreading belief in a language that disarmed suspicion. A song could travel from castle to village, from feast to marketplace, planting seeds where inquisitors could not tread. Noble patrons welcomed these musicians, filling their halls with music that lifted hearts and softened the weight of daily struggle. Yet those same halls became echo chambers for Cathar thought, as songs cloaked in allegory passed from ear to ear. Lords and ladies, already inclined toward the independence of Occitania, found in these verses a resonance with their own doubts about Rome. The troubadours, whether intentionally or not, became carriers of rebellion wrapped in beauty. The Church grew uneasy with this flowering of art. Bishops recognized that poetry, seemingly harmless, had become a vessel for heresy. The melodies could not be silenced easily, for they belonged to the culture itself, woven into the spirit of Occitania. To ban the songs would be to strike at the heart of a society that valued its voice of freedom. The words of the troubadours were too subtle, their meanings too veiled, for the Church to root out completely. Among the verses, references to a hidden cross began to surface in ways only the faithful could recognize. Descriptions of secret meetings under stars, of light concealed in darkness, of love that could not be named, all these hinted at the forbidden symbol. Some spoke of a sign carried within, others of the mark unseen by kings. Listeners who shared Cathar belief understood, while others heard only the beauty of poetry. The songs created a sense of shared secrecy, a knowledge that bound listeners together. To those who carried the hidden cross, hearing such verses was a reminder they were not alone, that others shared their devotion and their defiance. In the loneliness of heresy, surrounded by a world hostile to their faith, music became comfort, a reassurance that their truth still breathed in song. Even when persecution grew stronger, troubadours did not entirely fall silent. Some took to coded riddles, weaving layers upon layers of meaning that could survive the scrutiny of inquisitors. Others carried their songs across borders, ensuring that Cathar ideas traveled beyond Occitania into distant lands. Their music became not only memory, but resistance, a living voice against silence. The troubadours and their secret songs formed an invisible thread in the Cathar story. Where swords could be broken and fortresses could fall, a melody endured. Hidden in the folds of language, the cross travelled from voice to voice, carried not on parchment or stone, but in the breath of song. It was poetry as defiance, music as memory, and song as shield against the power of Rome. The Church could not ignore the growing influence of Cathar belief. From Rome came warnings that Occitania had become a land of heresy, a region where priests were mocked, bishops defied, and troubadours sang verses that undermined Catholic authority. To root out this danger, the Church forged a new weapon, the Inquisition, a force that would watch, question, and punish with a relentless eye. The inquisitors were not soldiers, though their arrival was often more feared than the march of an army. They carried with them the authority of Rome, armed not with swords, but with questions, with oaths, with records written in ink that could seal a person's fate. They were men trained to detect deception, to unravel secrets, to drag hidden beliefs into the open light of judgment. Their power rested not on force of arms, but on fear, for suspicion alone could destroy a family, a village, an entire community. In towns across Occitania, whispers spread quickly when inquisitors arrived. They set up tribunals, calling villagers to testify against neighbors, demanding confessions, demanding names. A single accusation could lead to interrogation, and interrogation could lead to prison or pyre. Families torn between loyalty and survival often betrayed one another, feeding the machine of fear. The Inquisition thrived not only on punishment, but on the terror it inspired. Their methods were precise and calculated. Inquisitors demanded oaths of obedience, pressed villagers to reveal what they knew, and meticulously recorded every detail. To lie under oath was perilous, to remain silent suspicious, to tell the truth deadly. The inquisitors learned the local languages, questioned tirelessly, and gathered reports with a patience that seemed endless. Even the faintest hint of Cathar belief was enough to destroy a reputation. The presence of the hidden cross became a central obsession. Inquisitors sought to uncover its meaning, to find evidence of its existence, to trace its presence in households and gatherings. They demanded that villagers describe secret symbols, pressed them to recall songs and gestures, forced them to remember even the faintest detail of Cathar practice. What had once been carried silently in memory now became a matter of survival. For the Cathars, secrecy grew ever more essential. Meetings were held at night, symbols concealed within gestures so subtle they could pass unnoticed. The perfecti moved from place to place, sheltered by loyal families who risked everything to hide them. Even the consolamentum was given in whispers, sometimes administered at the moment of death to escape detection. The hidden cross sank deeper into shadows, becoming both shield and burden. The Inquisition's power lay in its invisibility. Unlike armies, it did not announce its advance with banners or drums. It appeared quietly, settled into a town, and spread fear like smoke. Villagers knew that any word, any song, any gesture could be reported. Trust unraveled, neighbors looked upon one another with suspicion, and silence became the only defense. Yet, even under such pressure, the Cathar faith did not vanish. Songs still traveled, secret symbols still passed, and the hidden cross endured in silence. Fear could scatter communities, but it could not erase memory, and memory was the soil in which faith continued to grow. The inquisitors may have broken families and burned bodies, but the cross remained untouchable, hidden where fire could not reach. The Church celebrated the success of the Inquisition, yet beneath the surface resistance persisted. Every confession forced by fear created resentment. Every pyre lit in the town square deepened the memory of injustice. The Inquisition did not only root out heresy, it also sowed seeds of bitterness that would endure for generations. The watchful eye of the Inquisition turned Occitania into a land of silence, but silence itself became defiance. In whispers, in secret songs, in gestures unseen, the hidden cross still glowed faintly. Against the scrutiny of inquisitors, the Cathars held to their mystery, believing that truth could survive even in shadows. High in the mountains of Occitania, where paths wound steeply through rock and mist, the Cathars found their refuge. The castles that crowned these heights were not only fortresses of stone, but sanctuaries of spirit, bastions where the hidden cross was guarded against the armies of Rome and the watchful eyes of inquisitors. Their walls rose defiantly against the sky, a statement of endurance in a world closing in upon them. Among the most famous was Montségur, perched like an eagle's nest upon its steep mountain. To climb its slopes was to ascend into another world, where the horizon stretched endlessly and the valleys below seemed distant, unreachable. Within its walls the Cathars gathered, sustained by loyal lords and noble families who offered protection. Montségur became more than a fortress. It became a symbol of defiance, the spiritual heart of resistance. Other strongholds dotted the land: Pérepetus, Queribus, Puylorens, each one a sentinel guarding the Cathar faith. Their towers overlooked valleys where villagers toiled. Their walls echoed with the voices of troubadours. Their chambers sheltered perfecti, who blessed the faithful in secrecy. From these heights the Cathars could look down upon the world below, seeing both beauty and danger spread across the landscape. Life within these castles was hard, yet filled with devotion. Food was scarce, supplies difficult to bring up the steep paths, and winters bit with cruel cold. Yet the Cathars endured, finding strength in prayer and in the certainty that they were guardians of truth. Within the stone walls, the hidden cross was carried in memory, in song, in whispered rites that gave meaning to the struggle. The castles were not only homes for believers, but also centers of strategy. Lords sympathetic to the Cathars offered refuge, knowing full well the risk of defying Rome. Meetings were held in torchlit chambers, messages carried through hidden paths, and alliances forged in secrecy. Every castle became a fortress, not just of stone, but of spirit, a place where the flame of belief refused to be extinguished. The sight of these fortresses troubled the Church and the French crown alike. They stood as visible reminders of defiance, their walls daring Rome to strike. From the valleys below, peasants and travelers could see their towers rising against the horizon, a constant reminder that Cathar faith had not been silenced. To the faithful, these castles were sanctuaries. To their enemies, they were nests of rebellion. Sieges became inevitable. Armies marched, banners raised, demanding surrender. Yet the Cathars within resisted with courage that defied their meagre numbers. Some castles fell quickly, others held out for months, enduring hunger and relentless assault. Each fall was a tragedy, yet each resistance became legend, told in whispers long after the walls were breached. Montségur became the greatest symbol of all, a mountain fortress that stood defiantly for years. Within its walls, the hidden cross was carried, protected by men and women who believed that even if the fortress fell, their truth would endure. The defenders knew they faced death, yet they chose resistance, preferring to stand in defiance rather than surrender their faith to Rome. The castles of resistance shaped the memory of the Cathar struggle. Long after their stones crumbled, the stories remained, of torches burning in the night, of songs sung within cold halls, of faith stronger than fear. These fortresses became not only places of defense, but monuments of devotion, carved into the landscape as testaments of defiance. High upon their peaks the Cathars kept watch, guarding a faith that refused to bow. Their castles stood as lighthouses of belief in a sea of hostility, their walls sheltering the hidden cross that Rome could not claim. Even as armies closed in, these strongholds held the silence of prayer, the strength of conviction, and the enduring mystery of a people who chose faith over survival. The year was 1209 when the Pope's call to arms echoed across Christendom. For the first time, a crusade was not aimed at the distant Holy Land, but at the heart of Europe itself. The target was not Muslim kingdoms or pagan tribes, but fellow Christians, the Cathars of southern France, whose beliefs the Church deemed more dangerous than any external foe. To Rome, the spread of their teachings was a disease that had to be cut out at its root, no matter the cost. Armies assembled from the north, eager for both spiritual reward and earthly plunder. Knights who might otherwise have ridden east to Jerusalem now turned their lances south, drawn by promises of indulgences and the sanction of holy war. The banners of the cross fluttered above them, but their mission was not to liberate, it was to destroy. Towns and villages of Occitania braced themselves as this tide of steel and fire began its march. The first strike came at Béziers, a thriving city where Catholics and Cathars lived side by side. When the Crusaders demanded the heretics be handed over, the citizens refused, unwilling to betray neighbors, friends, and family. The response was merciless. The city was stormed, and in a frenzy of slaughter, thousands were put to the sword. Legend remembers the words of the papal legate when asked how to distinguish heretics from faithful Catholics. "Kill them all, God will know his own." Whether the words were truly spoken or not, the massacre of Béziers became a symbol of the cruelty to come. From Béziers, the Crusaders marched onward, their campaign burning through Occitania like a storm. Carcassonne fell next, its inhabitants expelled, its walls stripped of defenders. Castles were seized, villages destroyed, fields left in ashes. For the Cathars, this was no longer a struggle of secrecy and survival, but open war waged against them with overwhelming force. The hidden cross was carried now not only in whispered rites, but in the hearts of those who fled the advancing armies, clinging to their faith amidst devastation. The brutality of the crusade shocked even those who supported it. Entire communities were uprooted, families displaced, and towns reduced to rubble. Yet the Crusaders pressed forward with relentless determination. Each victory was framed as a triumph of orthodoxy, each massacre as divine justice. The Pope's blessing hung over them like a shield, justifying horrors that would otherwise be condemned. Resistance did not vanish. Noble families loyal to the Cathars raised their banners in defiance, retreating to fortified castles and mountain strongholds. From these refuges they resisted as long as supplies and courage held. But against the might of combined Crusader forces, their walls often crumbled. The siege engines of the north battered stone, while betrayal and starvation worked from within. One by one, the strongholds of Occitania fell, their defenders slaughtered or scattered into the wilderness. The crusade was more than a war of armies. It was a campaign of terror designed to break the spirit of an entire people. Survivors of massacres carried tales of horror to other towns, sowing fear before the Crusaders even arrived. The Church's goal was not only to defeat the Cathars, but to erase the very soil in which their faith had grown. By fire and sword, Occitania was to be remade in obedience to Rome. Yet the Cathar spirit endured, even as their homes burned and their families perished. The hidden cross passed quietly through the chaos, guarded by survivors who carried it into mountains and forests, refusing to let it vanish. Songs were still whispered, prayers still spoken, even as flames rose against the sky. The crusade could destroy bodies, but belief slipped through its grasp, preserved in memory and silence. The Albigensian crusade stretched for decades, its violence reshaping the map of southern France. Occitania, once a land of freedom and song, was brought under the heavy hand of northern lords loyal to Rome. Yet the legacy of fire did not erase the story of the Cathars. Instead, it deepened the mystery of their hidden cross, making it a symbol not only of purity, but of endurance against overwhelming power. Through blood and smoke, the crusade etched itself into the history of Europe. The clash between Rome and the Cathars was not merely a battle of swords, but a collision of worlds, one seeking uniformity through force, the other clinging to a vision of truth beyond material corruption. In that collision, the hidden cross became both wound and beacon, a reminder of a faith that refused to die even under fire. At the heart of the Cathar faith stood the perfecti, men and women who had taken vows of radical purity. They were not priests in the Catholic sense, nor monks bound to cloisters, but living examples of the path to light. Their lives were marked by renunciation, no wealth, no meat, no oaths, no violence. They owned little more than the robes they wore, carrying nothing but their faith and the hidden cross etched into their spirit. The perfecti were the guides of their people, revered for the simplicity and sincerity of their lives. They traveled from village to village, offering counsel, blessing, and the sacred rite of the consolamentum. Unlike the priests of Rome, they demanded no tithe, built no towering churches, and sought no earthly authority. Their authority lay in the respect they commanded through example, for they lived the purity they preached. To the faithful, they were not distant figures of power, but companions in the struggle of life. Their purity set them apart, but it also burdened them. The perfecti carried the hopes of their communities, serving as mediators between the faithful and the divine. When a believer neared death, it was the perfectus who would be called to administer the consolamentum, preparing the soul for its release from the prison of the flesh. This rite was no mere ritual, but the very heart of salvation for the Cathars, a passage into light that bypassed the sacraments of the Church. As the crusade raged and the Inquisition spread its net, the lives of the perfecti became perilous. To shelter one was to risk execution, yet many families opened their homes in secret, offering food and refuge. Disguised as travelers, they moved quietly, carrying only what they needed, blessing those who sought them. To the persecutors, capturing a perfectus was a triumph, for it struck at the spiritual core of the Cathar movement. Despite the danger, the perfecti did not abandon their vows. They refused to bear arms, even when surrounded by armies, refusing to fight for survival, for to take a life was to betray their faith. They endured hunger, imprisonment, and torture, yet clung to their belief that the soul's purity was worth more than earthly life. In their calm defiance, they revealed the depth of their devotion, embodying a faith that could not be crushed by fear. The hidden cross remained bound to them. Some carried small carvings of wood, others traced it invisibly in the air when offering blessings. Often it existed only in memory, a symbol that could not be confiscated. The perfecti became living vessels of the cross, their very lives a testament to its meaning. Wherever they walked, the cross travelled, unseen yet present in every act of compassion and courage. When castles fell, the perfecti were often given the choice: renounce their faith and live, or remain steadfast and face the fire. Many chose fire. The chronicles of their enemies record these deaths as stubborn heresy, but to the faithful they became martyrs, carrying the hidden cross into the flames with unwavering devotion. Their refusal to betray their beliefs made them legends in the eyes of those who survived. The last generations of perfecti became wanderers, fugitives in their own land. They moved through forests and mountains, hiding in caves, meeting believers in secrecy. Their presence grew rarer, their numbers smaller, yet each appearance gave strength to the scattered faithful. For as long as even one perfectus lived, the light of the Cathar faith had not been extinguished. To the Church, their destruction was essential, for as long as the perfecti endured, the Cathar way could not be considered dead. To the Cathars themselves, the perfecti were the keepers of the flame, guardians of the hidden cross, living proof that purity could still survive in a world of corruption. Their persistence carried meaning far beyond their numbers, embodying the soul of the movement. The story of the perfecti is one of devotion carried to its highest cost. They lived quietly, without power or armies, yet their presence shaped the course of history. Their hidden cross did not gleam in gold, but in the fire of sacrifice, in the resilience of a faith that defied both Rome and the world. Even as their numbers dwindled, their memory endured, carried like a secret torch into the silence of time. The Cathars rejected the elaborate ceremonies of the Catholic Church, seeing in them the trappings of wealth and power rather than the path to salvation. Their worship was simple, their rituals few. Yet within this simplicity lay profound meaning. Theirs was a faith of light and shadow, practiced quietly in homes, barns, or secluded clearings, where the hidden cross could be invoked away from the gaze of Rome. At the center of their spiritual life stood the consolamentum, the single sacrament they recognized. Unlike baptism or the Eucharist, it was not a ritual performed on infants or repeated throughout life. It was given once, often at the moment of death, as a final purification of the soul. With the laying on of hands, the perfectus blessed the believer, releasing them from the bonds of the material world. To the Cathars, this was not a symbol, but a real liberation, a passage into light. The ceremony was solemn and quiet. No incense burned, no bells rang, no altars loomed. Instead, prayers were spoken softly, a hand rested gently on the head of the believer, and silence wrapped the moment in sacred weight. In that silence, the hidden cross was present, unseen but powerful, the true sign of the faith. For those who received it, the consolamentum was the greatest treasure, worth more than any relic of Rome. Other practices reinforced their rejection of the material. The Cathars fasted regularly, abstained from meat, and avoided oaths, believing that each of these tied the soul more tightly to the corruption of the world. Their lives were marked by simplicity, not as deprivation, but as a path of freedom. To reject the pleasures of the flesh was to weaken the chains that bound the soul, to take one step closer to the realm of light. Gatherings of the faithful were often small and secret. Families might gather in a home, a perfectus presiding with quiet words and blessings. Songs might be sung, not with pomp, but with sincerity, their verses carrying hidden meanings that echoed Cathar teaching. These were not public spectacles, but intimate moments of shared faith, where the hidden cross shone most brightly in the silence of trust. For the Cathars, even prayer carried a different meaning. They did not pray to saints, nor venerate relics, nor appeal to Rome for intercession. Their prayers were direct, reaching toward the God of light without intermediary. The hidden cross was invoked in gestures and in words, shaping the very structure of their devotion. Each prayer was an act of defiance, a declaration that their faith did not need the approval of Rome. The simplicity of their rituals made them difficult to eradicate. Unlike churches with altars and statues, Cathar worship left little trace for inquisitors to destroy. A whispered prayer could vanish into the air, a gesture could pass unnoticed, a blessing could be given in the quietest corner of a home. The hidden cross lived within these shadows, safe from the gaze of power. Yet, this very simplicity gave their rituals profound strength. Where the Church sought to awe with grandeur, the Cathars inspired with humility. A single hand upon the head of a believer carried more weight than the ceremonies of cathedrals, for it was free of corruption, rooted in purity, and infused with sincerity. To those who followed, this was the true faith, untainted by ambition. The rituals of light and shadow connected the Cathars across time and space. Whether in a mountain fortress or a humble village home, the consolamentum and the prayers of the faithful carried the same power. The hidden cross was the thread binding them together, a sign not of stone but of spirit, linking communities scattered by persecution. Even as inquisitors hunted them, the Cathars continued their rites in secret. The consolamentum was given in whispers, the hidden cross traced in silence, the prayers spoken with quiet devotion. In those rituals they found strength to endure, to face persecution without fear, to believe that their truth could not be destroyed. Theirs was a faith that survived not through spectacle, but through the power of simplicity, light in the shadows, the hidden cross shining where Rome could not reach. When swords threatened and inquisitors watched every word, the Cathars turned to symbols. Their faith, forbidden and hunted, could not always be spoken aloud, so it was written instead in signs, gestures, and subtle marks left behind for those with eyes to see. The hidden cross found new life in these codes, etched into stone, woven into patterns, disguised in ways that slipped past the notice of those who sought to destroy it. In the margins of manuscripts, faint markings appeared, lines intersecting at angles that formed a concealed cross. At first glance, they seemed no more than decorative flourishes or errors in the script, but for those who knew, they were affirmations of faith. A reader in silence might pause, trace the hidden design with a finger, and feel the presence of belief that had survived ink and fire. Architecture, too, carried secrets. In certain chapels and rural churches, long after the Cathars were thought extinguished, carvings showed patterns of geometry that seemed ordinary to most, but to the faithful whispered of duality, of light and shadow. Crosses were sometimes hidden in the lattice of a window, in the alignment of stones, in the placement of pillars. To the inquisitor, it was nothing. To the initiate, it was everything. Gestures formed another language, a movement of the hand, a way of clasping fingers in greeting, a pause in the recitation of a prayer. These could signal belonging, loyalty, recognition. The hidden cross lived in these gestures, invisible to outsiders, yet binding those who understood into a community of shared secrecy. The troubadours' songs themselves sometimes hid coded messages. Certain refrains, when repeated in sequence, suggested meanings beyond romance and longing. References to light imprisoned, to a beloved beyond reach, to a secret kept from kings. All of these layered additional depth upon verses that seemed harmless on the surface. The hidden cross was sung in such riddles, disguised in poetry, that no inquisitor could fully silence. Maps and geometry played their part as well. Some scholars have suggested that Cathar strongholds were not only fortresses of defense, but also part of a hidden pattern across Occitania. When connected by lines, the castles and sacred sites formed shapes reminiscent of a cross or other sacred geometry. Whether deliberate or coincidence, the suggestion that the Cathars inscribed their faith upon the very landscape itself adds a haunting dimension to their legacy. The hidden cross was also a spiritual code, understood differently depending on who carried it. For the perfecti, it was the living symbol of their vow, invisible yet constant, a reminder of purity in every step. For the credentes, it was a promise, a hope carried in silence until the day of the consolamentum. For all, it was a sign that their faith could not be captured by fire, for it resided beyond the reach of material power. Knowledge itself became hidden. The Cathars were said to guard fragments of ancient teachings, gospels not sanctioned by Rome, wisdom carried from distant lands. Whether these texts were real or legendary, the idea of secret knowledge strengthened their aura of mystery. The hidden cross came to represent not only purity of faith, but also the preservation of truths forbidden by the Church. Even centuries later, hints of these codes remain scattered across the land, carvings half erased by weather, symbols faintly etched into stone, geometric designs in manuscripts, each one a possible echo of the Cathar hidden cross. To the historian, they are puzzles. To the seeker, they are clues leading back to a faith that refused to die. The Cathars may have been silenced, but their language of secrecy survived. In codes, symbols, and hidden knowledge, the cross endured not as gold or relic, but as a whisper in stone, a trace in ink, a gesture shared across centuries. Their defiance was not only in belief, but in the art of concealment, in turning the act of hiding into a form of resistance that still lingers in shadow. Among all the castles of Occitania, none has burned itself into memory like Montségur. Perched upon a sheer peak in the Pyrenees, its walls seem to touch the sky, defying both the reach of armies and the passage of time. To the Cathars, Montségur was more than stone. It was sanctuary, fortress, and holy place. Within its walls, the hidden cross was guarded with a devotion that made the stronghold the beating heart of resistance. For years, Montségur withstood the forces of the crusade. Its cliffs made direct assault nearly impossible, its defenders supplied by loyal villagers who braved the steep paths to bring food and news. The perfecti found refuge within its chambers, blessing the faithful and carrying on the rites of their tradition. Songs were sung in its halls, prayers whispered against its walls, and for a time the hidden cross shone defiantly from its mountain throne. But Rome could not allow such a sanctuary to endure. In the winter of 1243, a vast army gathered at the base of the mountain. Crusaders surrounded Montségur, cutting off supplies and pressing the defenders into a long and brutal siege. The cold of winter pressed upon the fortress. Hunger gnawed at its inhabitants. Yet within the walls the Cathars held firm, sustained by faith and the conviction that their cause was greater than survival. Siege engines were dragged up the slopes, stones hurled against the fortress walls, while archers sent volleys of arrows raining down. Still Montségur stood. For months the battle continued, the castle clinging to the mountain as if refusing to let go of the world below. Its defenders believed they were holding not only stone, but the very soul of their faith, the last bastion of the hidden cross. Inside, life was austere, but filled with devotion. The perfecti comforted the fearful, administered the consolamentum to the sick, and strengthened the resolve of the defenders. Every prayer spoken within the walls seemed to defy the armies gathered outside, every whispered word of faith a stone added to their defense. The hidden cross was carried in every heart, unseen but unbroken. At last, after months of resistance, Montségur fell. The defenders, weakened by hunger and overwhelmed by numbers, could no longer hold. Yet what followed was not mere surrender, but a choice. Over 200 Cathars refused to renounce their faith. Bound together, they walked calmly into the flames prepared for them at the foot of the mountain. To the Crusaders it was victory, to the faithful it was martyrdom. The hidden cross had not been surrendered, it had been carried into fire. Legends say that before the fall, a small group of believers escaped through hidden paths, carrying with them a treasure of immense importance. What they bore is unknown. Some say manuscripts, others a relic, others the very symbol of the hidden cross itself. The mystery has never been solved, but the idea of a treasure smuggled from Montségur gave rise to centuries of speculation and myth. The mountain itself became a silent witness. Its slopes bore the scars of siege, its summit the memory of sacrifice. Travelers who climbed its path spoke of a presence lingering there, as if the air still carried the echoes of prayer and the scent of smoke. Montségur became not just a ruin, but a monument to defiance, a place where faith met fire and refused to bow. The fall of Montségur marked a turning point. With its loss, the organized strength of the Cathar movement crumbled, scattered into fragments. Yet the story of the siege, the courage of its defenders, and the whispers of a hidden treasure ensured that their faith would never vanish entirely. The mountain preserved their memory in stone and silence. Montségur's walls may lie in ruin today, but its story endures. It is remembered as the fortress of the hidden cross, the place where the Cathars made their final stand, and where their faith, though crushed by armies, became eternal in memory. The mountain holds its silence, but within that silence the voices of the Cathars still seem to whisper. After the flames of Montségur had consumed the faithful, stories began to spread of a secret treasure carried away before the fall. Some said it was no treasure of gold or silver, but something far more precious, the heart of the Cathar faith itself, preserved from destruction. The legend of this vanished treasure grew, weaving itself into the mystery of the hidden cross. One version tells of 4 believers who slipped away from the fortress under cover of night, descending the treacherous cliffs by secret paths known only to them. They carried with them a chest, small enough to be borne upon their shoulders, heavy enough to contain something of great importance. Where they went and what became of them remains a mystery, but the idea that they escaped with the Cathars' most sacred possession captured the imagination of generations. What was in the chest? Some say ancient manuscripts, writings that preserved teachings the Church had sought to destroy. Others believe it contained relics, perhaps the bones of revered perfecti, perhaps a fragment of the true hidden cross. Still others, drawn by later legends, suggested that the Cathars had carried with them the Holy Grail, not a chalice of gold, but a symbol of divine truth hidden from the world. Theories multiplied with time. Some pointed to caves in the Pyrenees, claiming that the treasure was hidden deep underground, guarded by those who survived. Others whispered of secret passages beneath Montségur itself, tunnels through which the relics were carried to safety. A few claimed that the treasure was not hidden in the earth at all, but carried into exile by wandering Cathars who fled into Spain or Italy, taking with them the last sacred memory of their faith. For the people of the region, the vanished treasure became part of the landscape itself. Shepherds spoke of strange lights in the mountains, as if something sacred still glowed beneath the rocks. Travelers told tales of hidden shrines where symbols of the Cathars could still be found, carved quietly into stone by unknown hands. Every ruined tower, every cave, every abandoned path seemed to carry the possibility of concealment. The treasure may not have been physical at all. Some scholars suggest that what was carried from Montségur was not gold or relics, but knowledge, the memory of rituals, the wisdom of secret teachings, the living tradition of the hidden cross. In this interpretation, the true treasure was the faith itself, preserved by those who escaped and carried in silence across the generations. The Church feared such survival more than any chest of jewels. Relics could be seized, manuscripts destroyed, but memory, whispered in the quiet of homes, carried in song and symbol, could never be captured. The idea of a hidden treasure gave hope to survivors, reminding them that their faith was not entirely lost, that something precious had been saved from the flames. Legends of the vanished treasure entwined themselves with greater myths. Some believed it connected to the Grail traditions that flourished in medieval Europe, linking the Cathars to Arthurian stories of a sacred cup, a hidden truth, a quest for purity. Whether by coincidence or design, the two legends overlapped, blurring the line between history and myth, making the Cathars part of a mystery that stretched far beyond Occitania. To this day, seekers climb Mont Ségur and search the Pyrenees, drawn not only by the ruins of stone, but by the promise of what may have been hidden. They come with questions rather than answers, searching not only for relics, but for the meaning of the treasure itself. Was it real? Or was it only the story of survival woven into myth? The treasure that vanished remains a riddle as enduring as the hidden cross itself. Whether chest, relic, or memory, it embodies the resilience of a people who refused to surrender their faith. It is less a thing to be found than a truth to be sought, a reminder that what is hidden may still endure, waiting in silence for those willing to seek. After the fall of Mont Ségur and the vanishing of the treasure, silence seemed to descend upon Occitania. Yet silence does not always mean absence. In the hidden valleys of the Pyrenees, among rugged cliffs and shadowed forests, the memory of the Cathars lingered. The mountains became both tomb and sanctuary, holding within their stone the voices of those who had perished and the whispers of those who survived. Villagers told tales around hearths of the good men and good women who once walked the land. Shepherds spoke of lights seen upon the mountain slopes at night, as if souls carried the hidden cross across the ridges under starlight. Children were taught fragments of songs whose meanings they could not fully understand, verses that carried echoes of Cathar belief disguised as harmless folklore. The Pyrenees became keepers of memory, guardians of a story that refused to vanish. Small shrines dotted the landscape, their origins often uncertain. Some were said to have been carved by local hands, preserving symbols of purity and light. A few contained geometric designs that hinted at the hidden cross, woven into patterns of stone and wood. To the church, they were rustic expressions of devotion, but to those who remembered, they were reminders of a faith that had been driven underground. Oral traditions carried the Cathar legacy forward in secret. A shepherd's tale might include a mysterious stranger who blessed the dying with a touch of the hand. A peasant's story might speak of treasure hidden in a cave, guarded by spirits who appeared in the form of flames. Though centuries passed, such stories kept alive the idea that something of the Cathars had survived, hidden in the silence of the mountains. Some travelers claimed that exiled Cathars had fled into the Pyrenees, blending into the life of isolated communities. Though they no longer called themselves by the old name, they carried with them fragments of belief, practices of simplicity, and suspicion of authority. Over time, these fragments wove themselves into folk traditions, invisible to outsiders, yet still carrying the faint outline of a hidden cross. Pilgrims, too, came to the mountains, drawn by the legend of Mont Ségur and the possibility of discovering what had been lost. They walked the narrow paths, stood in ruined castles, and sought meaning in the silence of the stones. For many, the Pyrenees themselves became sacred, a natural cathedral where the presence of the Cathars still seemed to breathe. The persistence of these echoes troubled the church. Inquisitors recorded stories of villagers who still spoke kindly of the heretics who resisted denouncing them even generations later. Though the Cathar hierarchy had been broken, the memory of their purity remained. Rome could burn bodies and destroy castles, but it could not erase mountains, nor silence the whispers carried on their winds. For the people of the Pyrenees, remembering was a form of defiance. To recall the Cathars was to resist forgetting, to honor those who had chosen death over renunciation. In the valleys and ridges, memory became a kind of hidden cross itself, carried not in stone or wood, but in the hearts of peasants who refused to let their story die. Even today, the Pyrenees carry these echoes. Travelers hear tales of secret caves, of ancient songs, of ruins where voices seem to linger. The mountains stand as both witness and guardian, holding within their silence the memory of a people whose faith was declared heresy, yet whose story still breathes through the stones. The Cathars may have been scattered, but in the Pyrenees their shadow endures, a reminder that some truths do not vanish with fire. The hidden cross still seems to lie beneath those peaks, waiting in silence, carried not by armies or priests, but by the whisper of wind through the mountains. The story of the Cathars has long been woven into another great mystery of Europe, the legend of the Holy Grail. In the courts of medieval poets, the Grail appeared as a vessel of divine power, a chalice that offered purity and eternal truth. For some, the Grail was not merely a Christian relic, but a symbol of hidden knowledge, a secret beyond the grasp of kings and priests. It is here that the Cathars and their hidden cross meet the legends of Arthurian lore. In Occitania, where troubadours sang of forbidden truths, the Grail stories found fertile soil. The metaphors of unreachable light, of a vessel hidden from the world, resonated with Cathar beliefs. For the Cathars, the material world was corrupt, the true God hidden beyond, and salvation a treasure sought in purity of spirit. To them, the Grail could easily be seen not as a cup of gold, but as the essence of divine truth itself, a reflection of the hidden cross. Some chroniclers claimed that the Cathars guarded the Grail, or at least its secret meaning. Montségur, perched on its mountain peak, was compared to the Grail castle of legend, a fortress where sacred knowledge was preserved until the last moment. When the castle fell, some said the treasure carried away was not merely Cathar relics, but the Grail itself, smuggled into the Pyrenees, where it disappeared into mystery. The Grail legends, like Cathar teachings, spoke of quests and purity. Only the worthy, the pure of heart, could behold the Grail. Likewise, only those who lived in simplicity and renunciation could walk the Cathar path. The hidden cross and the Grail both represented a truth unseen by the world, a treasure concealed within light and shadow. Their similarities bound the two stories together, entwining history and myth. Poets of the time seemed aware of this connection. Chrétien de Troyes, Wolfram von Eschenbach, and other troubadours and writers drew upon imagery that paralleled Cathar thought. Wolfram's Parzival even described the Grail not as a cup, but as a stone of radiant light, echoing the Cathar vision of a spiritual truth beyond matter. Whether consciously or by influence, the stories carried undertones that resonated with the Cathar worldview. For seekers in later centuries, the link between Cathars and the Grail became irresistible. Some believed the Grail was hidden beneath Montségur, buried in secret tunnels. Others thought it had been carried by survivors into distant lands, safeguarded by secret brotherhoods. The Grail became not just a relic of Christ, but a symbol of all that the Cathars represented: purity, hidden truth, and defiance against worldly corruption. The Church, of course, dismissed such ideas, branding them as fantasies. To Rome, the Grail was a relic of Christ's passion, if it existed at all, and not a symbol to be claimed by heretics. Yet the persistence of the connection only strengthened the mystique of the Cathars. To many, the idea that they had guarded such a treasure explained the ferocity with which Rome sought to destroy them. Over time, the Grail legend grew beyond the boundaries of Occitania, carried into the literature of Europe and beyond. Yet the shadow of the Cathars lingered within it, the suggestion that the Grail was more than a cup, more than a relic, but a symbol of hidden light. The Cathar cross and the Grail became intertwined, two mysteries feeding each other, both whispering of truths forbidden by power. The connection may never be proven, but its allure remains strong. To stand at Montségur and gaze upon its ruins is to feel the weight of both history and legend, as if the stones themselves remember a treasure that once passed through their walls. Whether grail or cross, relic or symbol, the memory of something hidden lingers there, inviting seekers to look beyond the surface. The shadows of the grail stretch across time, casting their light upon the story of the Cathars. In legend and in memory, the two are bound together, each deepening the other's mystery, each pointing to a truth that lies just beyond reach, hidden in the silence of faith and in the shadows of history. To understand the fury with which Rome pursued the Cathars, one must see them through the eyes of the Church. The 12th and 13th centuries were times when the authority of the Catholic Church reached across kingdoms, binding Europe in a common faith. Its power was vast, its rituals central to every stage of life, its wealth unmatched. Yet in the hills of southern France, a rival had emerged, not by sword, but by belief. And that rival threatened the very foundation upon which Rome rested. The Cathars undermined the Church's authority at its root. They denied the sacraments, dismissing baptism, confession, and the Eucharist as empty gestures. They rejected the priesthood, calling it corrupted by wealth and power. They refused to recognize the Pope as God's representative on earth. To Rome, this was not simply heresy, it was rebellion against the structure that held Christendom together. What made the Cathars especially dangerous was their appeal. They did not lurk in shadows alone, they were embraced openly by lords, ladies, merchants, and peasants. Their perfecti lived lives of visible purity, in stark contrast to bishops known for indulgence and greed. Their simplicity shamed the wealth of Rome, their humility condemned its pride. People looked at the perfecti and saw what faith could be, and in that comparison, the Church lost ground. The Church had faced heresy before, but rarely one so widespread, so embedded in a region, and so resistant to intimidation. Occitania was not a fringe corner of Europe, but a vibrant land of culture and commerce, whose independence already troubled Rome. To allow the Cathars to flourish, there was to risk the spread of their teachings across all Christendom. Rome also feared the Cathar rejection of violence and oaths, which threatened the feudal order itself. If men refused to take up arms or swear allegiance, the very structure of medieval society would collapse. By undermining the authority of lords and kings as well as priests, the Cathars challenged not just the Church, but the fabric of power in Europe. To the Pope and his legates, the hidden cross was not a harmless symbol, but a declaration of defiance. Every whispered prayer, every consolamentum, every troubadour's song represented resistance to Rome's authority. The Cathars were not just heretics, they were rivals, a parallel church that offered salvation without priests, forgiveness without confession, and truth without Rome. The response was ruthless. Crusade, Inquisition, and fire were unleashed not only to destroy a heresy, but to erase a competitor. Rome sought not only to correct error, but to annihilate a rival that had shown the people another way. The ferocity of the Albigensian Crusade can only be understood in this light. It was not merely a battle of faith, but a struggle for dominance. Yet even as Rome triumphed in arms, the Cathars continued to haunt it. The memory of their purity, the stubbornness of their martyrs, the whispers of their hidden cross, all these lingered as quiet accusations against the corruption of power. The more Rome sought to silence them, the more their story seemed to endure. To the Church, the Cathars were a threat to order. To history, they became a reminder of what power fears most: those who refuse to bow, who live their truth in simplicity, who challenge authority not with armies, but with purity. Their hidden cross was not only a symbol of their faith, but of their defiance, a mark of a forgotten rival that Rome could never fully erase. Today, the ruins of Occitania's castles stand as silent witnesses to that struggle. Rome's victory was real, but incomplete. The Cathars, though destroyed in body, survived in memory, in legend, and in the shadow of their hidden cross, a rival the Church could never quite forget. Though the Cathar faith was driven underground, echoes of their presence linger in the stones and images of Europe. Art and architecture, often shaped by the Church, could not entirely erase what the Cathars had inspired. Subtle patterns, strange figures, and quiet anomalies remain, as if the hidden cross carved itself into history against the will of its enemies. In certain rural chapels of southern France, frescoes reveal figures whose gestures do not quite match Orthodox devotion. A hand raised in blessing may conceal the outline of a cross unseen by the untrained eye, or robes fall in folds that form a pattern of intersecting lines. These images passed unnoticed by priests, yet, for those who remembered the Cathars, they may have been signals, reminders that their truth endured even within spaces claimed by Rome. Carvings in stone also preserve strange hints. On the walls of castles once sympathetic to the Cathars, small crosses appear not in the bold Latin form, but in shapes closer to geometry, hidden within patterns of circles or interwoven knots. To an unknowing viewer, they are decoration. To the faithful, they are memory, preserved in silence. The hidden cross lived on in stone long after its believers had perished in flame. Illuminated manuscripts, too, hold their secrets. Marginalia, those small drawings in the corners of medieval texts, sometimes depict scenes that seem out of place. Figures walking with staffs marked by faint lines, animals shaped so their bodies form a cross, stars arranged in patterns of hidden meaning. These details, overlooked by censors, may have been the work of sympathetic scribes who carried Cathar memory into the very books the Church used to condemn them. Even architecture itself whispers of their presence. Some scholars point to the layout of certain chapels in Occitania, noting that their foundations do not align with the typical east-west orientation of Catholic churches. Instead, they form unusual angles, shapes suggestive of concealed geometry. Whether deliberate or coincidence, such anomalies fuel the belief that Cathar builders left their mark in ways Rome could not erase. Legends speak of entire structures designed with hidden meaning. A castle might be placed so that its towers form a cross when viewed from above, or its windows align with stars that carried symbolic weight. While many such claims rest upon speculation, the persistence of these ideas shows the deep hunger to find traces of the Cathars in the stones that survived their destruction. For local people, these ghosts in art and architecture became ways of remembering without speaking. A carving admired by generations might in truth be a relic of defiance, a symbol passed down in silence. A fresco in a forgotten chapel might carry the memory of those who refused Rome, hidden in plain sight. The hidden cross survived not only in ritual, but in the very fabric of walls, wood, and parchment. The persistence of these images speaks to the impossibility of total erasure. The Church could burn books, topple castles, and kill believers, but it could not watch every stone, every brushstroke, every carving. In the cracks of history, the Cathars left their shadows, faint but enduring, haunting the culture that sought to obliterate them. To walk through Languedoc today is to see traces everywhere, though often subtle. A small carving on a weathered lintel, a star-shaped window in a ruined fortress, a faded mural half hidden by centuries of dust. Each may hold echoes of the hidden cross. Whether deliberate or accidental, they fuel the sense that the Cathars still whisper through art and architecture, preserved not in grandeur, but in quiet persistence. Long after the fires of Montségur had burned to ash, whispers of Cathar ideas resurfaced in unlikely places. Secret societies, mystical orders, and esoteric traditions began to carry fragments of belief that echoed the old faith of the Pure Ones. Some suggested that the Cathars had not vanished, but had passed their legacy into hidden brotherhoods, where the hidden cross took on new forms and meanings. Freemasonry, with its symbols of geometry, light, and hidden knowledge, has often been linked to the Cathars. The emphasis on secrecy, initiation, and the search for truth resonated with the spirit of a faith that had been forced underground. Some Masonic legends even claim descent from the same stream of hidden wisdom, tracing their lineage not only through the builders of Solomon's Temple, but through the guardians of forgotten truths in medieval Europe. The parallels are striking. The Cathars saw the material world as shadow and illusion, while Masonic teachings often speak of seeking light, of moving from ignorance to enlightenment. Both traditions valued symbols over dogma, and both carried knowledge in coded forms that outsiders could not easily decipher. The hidden cross, once forbidden in Occitania, may have been reborn in Masonic emblems that spoke the same language of secrecy. Esoteric traditions across Europe also bore echoes of Cathar thought. Alchemists spoke of a divine spark trapped in base matter, awaiting release through transformation, a theme that mirrors the Cathar view of the soul imprisoned in the body. Mystical groups whispered of dualities of spirit and matter, light and shadow, good and evil, locked in eternal struggle. These ideas, condemned by Rome, found sanctuary in hidden circles where seekers of forbidden wisdom gathered. Legends grew that survivors of the Cathars had carried their teachings into these societies, disguising them beneath layers of allegory. The treasure of Montségur, some claimed, was not relics or gold, but the knowledge that later shaped esoteric traditions. In this telling, the hidden cross became a symbol not only of resistance, but of continuity, a thread woven into the tapestry of Europe's secret history. Rosicrucians, too, carried ideas of hidden knowledge, of light preserved through centuries, of truth revealed only to the worthy. Though centuries separated them from the Cathars, the resonance of their symbols, roses, crosses, secret signs, suggests a kinship of spirit, if not direct descent. The hidden cross may have been reborn in their emblems, veiled in new imagery, but carrying the same essence of defiance against corruption. For many seekers, the connection is more than speculation. They see in Freemasonry and other esoteric orders a continuation of the Cathar mission, a preservation of a spiritual path that Rome could not destroy. The hidden cross lives on in their lodges and rituals, not as a relic of the past, but as a living symbol of purity and truth. Historians often dismiss such claims as invention, the romantic imagination of later centuries, eager to link themselves to noble martyrs. Yet the persistence of these legends shows how deeply the Cathars captured the European mind. Even if the connections are symbolic rather than direct, the idea of their survival in secret societies keeps their story alive in ways that ordinary history cannot. In this sense, the Cathars never entirely vanished. Their hidden cross was not only remembered in ruins and songs, but reimagined in the secret symbols of later traditions. Whether or not Freemasonry or other orders truly descend from them, the echo of their faith resounds in the esoteric search for hidden truth, a reminder that what is suppressed often finds new life in secrecy. The Cathars passed into silence, but their silence was not empty. It became the soil from which new traditions grew, carrying forward the hidden cross into circles of secrecy, where it could shine once more, guarded against the gaze of power. Centuries have passed since the fires of Montségur, yet in the Languedoc region of France, the legacy of the Cathars still breathes. The castles that once stood as fortresses of resistance now lie in ruins, their stones open to the sky, their walls worn by wind and rain. Yet pilgrims and seekers still climb their steep paths, drawn not by conquest but by memory. They come searching for the hidden cross, for traces of a faith that lingers like a shadow across the land. Tourists wander through the ruins of Pérepetus, Quéribus, and Montségur, marveling at their heights and the vistas they command. Yet many feel more than history there. They speak of a presence, a silence heavy with meaning, as if the stones themselves remember. To walk through these castles is to walk through the memory of the Cathars, where every tower and stair seems to echo with the footsteps of those who carried the hidden cross. In villages across Languedoc, museums preserve fragments of the past, manuscripts, relics, and stories recorded by inquisitors who sought to erase them. Local guides recount the tales of the pure ones, telling visitors of their beliefs, their persecutions, and their final sacrifices. The hidden cross is displayed not as an artifact of stone, but as an idea that continues to inspire those who seek purity beyond corruption. Pilgrimages continue, though of a different kind. Modern seekers climb to Montségur not as defenders, but as explorers of spirit. They stand upon its summit at sunrise, watching lights spill across the valleys, and speak of feeling a connection to those who once walked its walls. Some meditate in silence, others sing, and some trace invisible crosses in the air, as if to call back the hidden symbol carried by the Cathars. The legend of the treasure still draws attention. Writers, historians, and dreamers search caves, tunnels, and ruins for clues of what may have been hidden. Though no chest has ever been found, the search itself keeps the mystery alive. For many, the treasure is no longer a material object, but the story itself, the reminder that truth can survive even in defeat. Local folklore continues to keep the memory alive. Songs, tales, and traditions hint at Cathar echoes, often blending seamlessly with regional culture. Children learn of the good men, sometimes without knowing their true identity, and festivals commemorate the castles where history and myth are inseparable. In this way, the hidden cross is carried forward not as doctrine, but as heritage. For modern France, the Cathars represent both tragedy and inspiration. They are remembered as victims of cruelty, but also as symbols of freedom, of the right to believe outside the authority of Rome. In an age where faith has fractured and new spiritualities rise, the Cathar story resonates with those who seek purity of belief, unbound by institutions. Writers and artists have embraced their legacy. Novels, films, and paintings draw upon the mystery of the hidden cross, reimagining the Cathars as guardians of forgotten wisdom. Though often romanticized, these works ensure that their story continues to reach new generations, transforming historical tragedy into enduring myth. Travelers to the region find more than history. They find a mirror. The ruins, the songs, the silence of the Pyrenees speak not only of a past faith, but of the human longing for truth, for freedom, for purity in a world that so often corrupts. The hidden cross becomes less about the Cathars alone and more about the enduring search for meaning. In modern France, the Cathars live on not in armies or rituals, but in memory and imagination. Their cross remains hidden, not in secrecy this time, but in the hearts of those who see in their story a reflection of their own search. The land itself breathes with their presence, and in every ruined stone the hidden cross still lingers. The story of the Cathars has survived not in books alone, but in silence, in ruins, in the whispers of mountains and the echoes of songs. They were crushed by armies, silenced by inquisitors, and erased from the records of Rome. Yet their presence lingers, elusive and unbroken. At the heart of their story lies the hidden cross, a symbol that refuses to fade, calling across centuries to those who seek meaning in shadows. What was the hidden cross? Was it a relic smuggled from Montségur, a wooden sign carried by the perfecti, or a symbol etched only in memory? Some believe it was the true Holy Grail, concealed in metaphor and myth. Others see it as a spiritual truth, the belief that purity and light survive even when the world turns dark. Whatever form it took, the hidden cross remains a riddle, a question that has never been fully answered. The Cathars themselves are gone, yet their absence feels incomplete. Their castles still crown the hills of southern France, their songs still drift through folklore, and their memory still inspires seekers who climb the mountains in search of silence. The hidden cross lives not in museums or treasures, but in the persistence of curiosity, in the refusal of history to let them vanish entirely. Their story endures because it touches something universal. It is the story of faith against power, of purity against corruption, of voices silenced yet never forgotten. The hidden cross stands as a reminder that even when truth is hunted, it finds ways to survive, in symbols, in stories, in the quiet resilience of memory. Perhaps the hidden cross is not meant to be found, but to be sought. Its power lies in the search itself, in the act of questioning, in the willingness to look beyond what is visible. In that search we join the Cathars themselves, who looked past the material world toward a light they believed waited beyond. The enduring mystery is not only about them, but about us. How we remember what we choose to seek, and how we carry forward the stories of those who dared to believe differently. The Cathars may have walked into fire, but their cross, hidden yet eternal, still casts a faint glow upon the stones of Occitania. The mountains hold their silence, the ruins guard their memory, and the songs of troubadours linger like distant echoes. The hidden cross endures, not as a relic of the past, but as an invitation to look deeper, to listen more closely, and to seek meaning in the shadows of history. Thank you for joining this journey into the forgotten world of the Cathars and the mystery of their hidden cross. If this story has intrigued you, inspired you, or simply given you a moment of reflection, I invite you to support this channel. Subscribe so you don't miss future explorations of history's secrets, like this film, to help it reach more seekers of forgotten tales. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think the hidden cross truly was? And if you found this story worth keeping alive, share it with your friends and loved ones, so that the memory of the Cathars continues to breathe through every voice that carries it forward. The hidden cross remains a mystery, but together, by remembering, we ensure it is never forgotten.